Niis Lamptey Show. My name's Joey. I expected this is how long we haven't recorded for. I expected myself to say hello after I introduced myself. But I didn't need to, did I?
Hello, Pod.
I'm joined this week by Paul.
All right, mate.
And by Neil.
Hello.
And by the lonely season himself, Laurie Kilpatrick.
Hello.
Laurie, do you mind us revealing your full name? I don't know whether that's a...
Don't you dare.
Whether
No, obviously that's fine, yeah.
The mask that you hide behind is one that is purposeful. Like formerly of this parish, little Eddie Wilson, who apparently doesn't exist according to the internet anymore.
He made me delete him from the internet. You realise how hard that is?
Yeah. He has no internet presence. In death, his name is little Eddie Wilson. Laurie, before we kick off with Moments of the Week, we had a couple of questions that were put to you, some literary, some footballing based, but one of them was if you would care to reveal your favourite COV player of all time. Perhaps, perchance, you'd like to start off by revealing a little bit about your COV preferences.
So I kind of was a bit stumped by this, but I'm going to go old school and say Richie Partridge, if
Is that old school?
tickles
Wow.
anyone, because he was just... For me it kind of is, but I just remember having him in the team and just thinking, how can we not win the league with Richie Partridge in the side? 'Cause from what I remember, he just used to skin everyone in sight until they realised that double marking him would successfully get rid of him, and then he stopped scoring goals really quickly. But yeah, him and Johnny Jackson, also another favourite, even though only for that goal against West Brom.
My favourite Richie Partridge moment was when he was rocked like a little baby by Dina Holdsworth. That was. Does anybody remember that? He scored that great goal. Was it against Reading? And he was promptly picked up by Dean Holdsworth and just given a bit of a rock.
Paul, I'm looking at you for clarification on this one.
Bit of a niche reference, but I remember it.
Yeah, the only other famous thing about Richie Partridge is he's Michael Owen's brother-in-law. So, I mean, I think we've now covered Richie Partridge. That's Richie Partridge's Wikipedia page sorted.
Neil's niche reference, Paul's clarification of facts. The Niis Lamptey Show is back, ladies and gentlemen.
Does not get better than this.
And that almost feels like a disclaimer rather than a promise. Yeah, I guess elephant in the room, although I don't really know if anybody cares, is this is the first time we've recorded in a month, so I apologise and we apologise for the delay. It has in fact been my fault, but we are slowly but surely getting back into the groove, very much like Whoopi Goldberg in Sister Act 2. We are going to kick off again with Moments of the Week. So, Neil, do you want to give us yours?
Was that Neil?
Yeah, it was Neil, yeah.
Right. Mine actually occurred 8 days ago. So, we're going to allow this, yeah?
Yeah, of course, yeah. I mean, I think anything that happened in the last month is probably...
Objection.
Okay. Objection, yeah.
You wait. You might object when I tell you. It was actually, I read an article on the BBC from Chris Anderson saying we're no longer looking for loan signings after we've got our sixth in the window. And I feel like I'm a little bit alone in this point, but I'm worried by the amount of loans and the amount of new faces and just the whole freshness of our team. It's annoying me.
You're not alone.
No, you're not alone, and I feel like we probably dedicate a section of the pod to this. I think it will probably come as part of the sort of dissection of the last month that I guess we'll sort of naturally steer towards as we get into the Port Vale game.
Was that a pun, Paul?
No.
I think you're crediting him with a level of intelligence that I would suggest isn't there.
It's good, though.
Paul, yours.
I mean, it'd be churlish not to have Moment of the Week as Reece Charles Cook wonder save. But there have been other things which have been worthy of note, which I'm sure we'll discuss. But as an actual standalone Moment of the Week, it would have to be the save from the free kick.
I think you won't necessarily appreciate this, and I apologise, but that you picking that as Moment of the Week is almost like your contrariness has completely double-backed on itself.
I'm saying that's something to be proud of. I mean, I'll go on to it just because it's really interesting. I don't know if you've read Tony Mowbray's little passionate speech to get the crowd back, and how he's basically dismissed our recent run of bad form, which has lasted about 12 games, by going, well, we missed Fleck for a game, and I wasn't really feeling well against Southend, and we nearly beat Walsall and Burton. That was just a fluke. It's like you've dismissed 12 games in like a sentence.
I was really hoping you were going to go through all 12 excuses.
Yeah, it's all,
can he
it's all
let
been
us
a bit
know
of bad
in future
luck
when he's feeling a bit under the weather, so we don't bother showing up for these games? Because that would be a nice heads up when you're travelling like 200 miles. Cheers, Tony.
Yeah.
And the other thing which came out of his press conference today was like, after sort of 11 games where we've sort of tried to win every game by playing open football, we played one game where we tried to be a bit more defensive, and we're abandoning that after one game to being our normal. It's just sort of, well, why bother just trying to be defensive for one game? It's like, I'm sure Laurie will explain. I get the feeling that Port Vale wasn't the greatest performance and wasn't really the back to basics. We're now got something to build on performance that he was alluding to, but I could be wrong.
We'll come on to that very shortly, but just for the sake of completeness, I will say that I do love watching Jacob Murphy round a keeper. I think especially under the sort of tight circumstances that he was in, that goal, I thought, there's a special place in my heart for Jacob Murphy. He's the template, even though he's a bit mercurial, he is the template of the footballer that I would have. He just looks like a 100-metre sprinter rather than a footballer, doesn't he? But there is a thing about him I don't quite know how to describe that I really, really like.
As you're saying that, I've just realised I've not watched the highlights. I feel like I did watch the highlights because I saw Reece Charles Cook save, and I felt like, I've watched the highlights. And then as you were talking about Murphy rounding the keeper, that doesn't ring any bells with me. So,
yeah, I mean, the highlights is probably somewhat of a grandiose term to describe the 2 minutes that I watched. But he just got a ball through, but in really, really tight circumstances. Really, you would suggest that maybe he'd have been better off just shooting first time, but I think Oggy has told him that he has to round the keeper every single time he gets the ball and isn't completely flat out knackered after 60 minutes, and he did so with aplomb.
Good one, Oggy.
Yeah, fair play, Oggy. Right, okay, Laurie, moment of the week?
Well, yeah, it was kind of a dismal game, but I think obviously I have a Madison-centric view of the world, so I think him coming off and getting a pretty good reception from the Cov fans was a relief for me massively, because I was seriously worried that he was going to get slagged off or just cop some flack for absolutely no reason. So when he went off with no moron shouting anything rude at him, on a personal level, that was a big achievement for me.
What do we do? Do we talk a little bit about Madison now? Or do we kind of, should we move on to Port Vale?
Yeah, the Madison one is interesting. It's good that he's got the response, or he appeared to get the response he had. But the whole thing is a farce and doesn't show the club up in a good light at all. But we can.
No, go on. Go on. Elaborate, and I think it's. Go on, elaborate a bit.
Who, me?
Yeah.
Well, I have three major issues with it. I don't see why we sold him when we did. To Norwich, and I understand that he may have chosen Norwich, to a team that are going to get relegated to the Championship. For him to then be loaned straight back to us. If he's loaned straight back to us, A, that means Norwich don't need him to try and stay up, and B, why sell him then? If you're going to get him back, and the club haven't come out and said we needed to sell him for this or this, why not sell him in January? Sell him in the summer when he's got another 10, 20 games under his belt. And the thing we've got the money now because he might get injured. I've never once heard anyone, when we sign a player, the first thing anyone says, we shouldn't have spent that on him. What if he breaks his leg tomorrow? It's just like, it's completely irrational. It's like argument. It's like we've sold him at the worst possible time for no apparent reason. And then to compound that, we've then got him back on loan. So we've got 6 loan players. So we've got that loan issue again. when it's like, well, we could have just kept him. We didn't have to sell him, from what we understand. So just keep him. Just, like, and the fact we've loaned him back, to me, makes it worse, just because it just shows the complete needlessness of it. It shows that Norwich don't need him. And we've just got a player who, at the end of the day, he's going in the summer for just... It's just completely unnecessary. And it's not just the fact that we've sold Maddison, who's our next young thing. It's at the end. It's while we're going on this run where we're just dropping down the table as well. It just compounded the misery of being a Cov supporter at times.
Neil, did it make any difference to you that it was Norwich?
It did. I just felt it was impulsive. It was too. I mean, we sort of heard the bid came in the evening. And it's just the talk and sort of the announcements that come afterwards. Like, you've got him obviously saying how pleased he is to be going to Norwich, but to do it now when there's no saying where they're going to be next year. I mean, people say, oh, he's going to the Premier League. You can't blame him for that. But he's not going to be playing for them in the summer. I just felt like it was too impulsive to sell him and for him to make this call, because it doesn't tell him anything. I mean, there's a very strong possibility, even with the run that we're on, that we could be in the Championship next year. But they could be in the Championship next year. So the only difference between the two clubs next season, when he's actually going to be playing for them, is money, as far as I can see it. I mean, stature-wise and everything, I mean, obviously they've remained higher up than us for a while, but that's what frustrates me. It's just that it's a decision made almost on a whim, when I just feel like he can do so much better, and... the decision isn't to be made now. I mean, he should be making that decision in the summer where all the cards are on the table and he knows what's going on and we know what's going on. It's just kind of a rushed one, and people say it will benefit him, but I just think it's a toss of a coin now for him. He's not going to anybody. He's just become Jacob Murphy. That's where he is, and you know that it's not anything special.
Laurie, thoughts on the matter?
Yeah, well, what Paul said, to me the two just go like hand in hand. The fact that they've rushed this deal, the timing, yeah, is all out. But the fact that they've bought him, and loaned him straight back to us means that Norwich have obviously seen that we're willing to sell him for less than he's worth, because they're like, oh, we could make a considered decision and wait till the summer. But we're just, what is it, 2 mil? What's 2 mil? Let's just get him, just put him in, send him back, and then we'll reassess in the summer. That's what pisses me off, because it's not a big deal to them, and selling Maddison should be a big deal. I think he's probably a better prospect than Callum Wilson in the long run, even though he's played less games and done less materially. But yeah, it's just the timing that baffles me. I just don't understand what situation the club is in if they feel like they have to sell right now, when, like everyone's already said 1,000 times, he's not going to be worth any less in the summer, is he? And I'm sure, I don't know him, but from all the noises, he wasn't like itching for a move. And like, who would be? What would be the point? Like, we're obviously going to let him go when he needs to go, when the money's right. So yeah, it was just baffling and so disappointing, because I'd gone out for dinner that night and I'd left, been like, Maddison hasn't left, it's all going to be fine. Came home from dinner, he's gone. And I was like, oh my God.
And the other thing is, if you're going to sell him, advertise you're going to sell him at the start of January, flog him, and then at least bring in someone who isn't Darius fucking Henderson or Stephen Hunt.
But so...
Because...
basic economics...
Sorry, Joe, I just want to get this out there, go on. And then you can comment on it. You look, the Coventry Telegraph have come out, I think, yesterday and went, we've got 20 players out of contract at the end of the season. And then you had Tony Mowbray going, wow, you look at the squad and we've got a load of youngsters on loan and we've got a load of 34-year-olds. And you're like, well, yeah, that's the squad you've built. But also, maybe the players we want, who are in their prime, in the mid-20s, might have cost a little bit of money. If we'd have sold Maddison on January the 1st and had £2.5 million to spend, maybe we'd have been able to actually bring in a couple of players who aren't virtually at retirement, who probably when they leave in the summer will just fuck off to the Costa del Sol, or a bunch of kids who aren't ours. Maybe you could have bought a couple of centre-backs who are in their mid-20s who might be able to get us out of this division. It's just... We're relying now on a squad to get us promoted when only Romain Vincelo out of our starting 11, and I think Reece Charles Cook will definitely be here next season.
But that almost seems staged, doesn't it? Because it's perfect window, because then they've got an excuse not to spend the money. So they've got the money, they're, oh, hands are tied, we can't spend it now. So then it's almost like by the time it gets to the summer, that money will have been absorbed by like non-footballing things, and it's, it just seems a little bit staged.
This is my big problem with it, is that I know that I think we as a podcast get accused of being pro-Sisu or whatever. They clearly gave Mowbray the belief that he could talk big at the start of the window about who was coming in. We're getting a pacey winger, and we're getting a striker, and we're getting a centre-back, and blah, 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 blah. We were also under the impression that Bigarumana was going to sign permanently, so that was one of the less loan deals that we had to have some sort of restriction on. That didn't happen. And I was also led to believe that John Fleck would be leaving the club, which would make sense when you look at the incoming purchases, purchases in the loosest sense, of people like Andy Rose and Bigarumana. That seems like sensible business that no one would have wanted, but that if somebody was coming in for Fleck, which was supposedly what was going to happen, you'd look at it and go, I guess we've got Bigarumana and Rose as cover, but then, you do whatever else out of it. But to have not signed a striker, which I think is as criminal as not having signed a permanent centre-back, and I agree with you, Paul, actually, on this one. When you look at Johnson and Turner, they are centre-backs who made phenomenal differences, and I can't help but think of that as being centre-backs in the prime of their career. If you look through the spine of the team, Vincelo, Turner, them, and Fleck to a certain extent, players that aren't children or that aren't fucking geriatrics, it must make some level of difference, because and even Jim O'Brien to a certain extent, there is something about that I think has some sort of telling impact. And I think that the way that this has been conducted, which is effectively that Mowbray's been made big promises, whether they've been able to find the right players or not, in the end, what we've done is we've not signed the players that we were supposed to sign, but crucially, Maddison going is just unacceptable under those circumstances. If we'd have signed the players and lost Maddison, that was one thing. But to lose Maddison for such a ridiculous way and not sign anyone, you have to look at the club and just think, well, you don't know what you're doing, do you?
No, and that's that. I had a quick look. I had a discussion with Matt Partridge on Twitter, and I had a look at Walsall and Burton. They had, I think, one of them had 8 players in between the ages like 22 and 31, and the other team had 7. And I think of those 15 players, I think only 2 were new to their club in January. In last July. So both Burton and Walsall have been building for a couple of years, and obviously they might not win promotion, and it's all if buts and maybes, but those 2 teams were teams that have been building for a couple of years. If you look at our team, other than John Fleck, the majority of them are newbies, and most of them are newbies since August. And we're continually building a new squad every season, and that can't help. I mean, it just can't. And I've got my issues with Mowbray at the moment, but when he comes out in the press and goes, well, we've got young kids or old men, it's like, you're the one who's built that squad. I'm sure there were players in their mid-20s who you could have gone out and signed, but you've decided to, if someone like Stephen Hunt rings up and goes, look, I think I can do a job, you're the one who's brought them in, but you've also decided to go on that route of having youngsters, and you've gone out and you signed 2 more youngsters, and again, we haven't got on to the Port Vale game yet, but by the sounds of it, one of them had a good game and one of them sort of had a bit of a dodgy spell. But after the last home game, when me and Pritchard were walking out, it was a case of, well, we're looking to bring in kids from another team to play in defence, when our own kids and some of the other kids like Jacob Murphy now are beginning to make mistakes. We're putting a lot of pressure on these 2 young lads to come in and be absolutely rock solid at centre-half, because they're kids. I think one of them's only really played for Woking and played, 2 appearances for Bournemouth. So we shouldn't expect him to come in and be instantly brilliant and not make any mistakes. He's bound to make one or two.
But we shouldn't expect that of anyone.
No, but I think you watch some of the youngsters make different types of mistakes to old players. And I think it's a case of it's worrying that we're now dependent. We've got these two new centre halves in, and it seems to be, well, they're going to solve our problems. It's like, well, they might not, because this is really their first, especially the one lad, it's his first team football. And there's a lot of pressure on that when the way we're playing at the moment, and especially the way we defended all season.
I feel like I could argue with you about this all night, but it's probably best that we get onto the Port Vale game at some point. Laurie, fill us in.
So yeah, bad day. You're lucky you didn't go. It is a horrible place for anyone who's ever been. You get ferried on some rank bus full of Coventry fans singing songs. But the first thing that struck me was just their pitch. I can't believe they've played an entire season on that. It was like the ball would just drop from the air and just kind of splat. It was like the ball was a pancake. And even in the warm-up, you could just see it. They were doing that thing when Oggy throws it over their head and they're asked to shoot. Sometimes the ball just fell completely flat. It's like you're playing cricket, like fourth team cricket. It just wouldn't rise, and Armstrong was just like, how am I going to hit that? But, so yeah, the first half an hour, they were all over us. It was embarrassing. They just ran us ragged. We were defending for our lives. The guy, Stevens, who is now etched in my head as number 15, because the guy behind me, who said he'd been to like every game this season, didn't even seem to know that we'd signed new players. He was just a rabbit in the headlights. He was fully just like turning on a sixpence and just like kicking it wherever, misplacing passes all over the shop. He was having a nightmare. It was kind of scary and embarrassing, but thankfully he kind of snapped out of that by about half time. And again, it was just a completely different team to the one we've seen, because obviously Mowbray thinks it's like fine to just throw everyone in at the deep end all of the time.
Can I ask you a question at this point?
Yeah. Please feel free to like interject at any point, because I'm liable to ramble.
No, and that's and you know, welcome to the lunch show. But when I looked at the team, I honest to God couldn't put it together. Can you explain how it was set up?
No, yeah, I agree. I was like, are we playing 5 at the back? Or so what we had was Stokes at left back, now looking like a disaster, personally. I think he just doesn't give us what we need to. And then we had Cargill and Ricketts at centre-back. Wait, am I forgetting someone?
Lawrence, did Lawrence start? Lawrence.
Sorry, Lawrence at right back, who I think is a really good signing, actually. And then we had Stevens playing DM with Fleck. And then...
Rose?
Sorry? Yeah, Rose, again, another DM. He had a really good game in the second half. So it was kind of like these 3 defensive midfielders, but Stevens was actually playing behind the other 2 for most of the first half and just causing complete havoc whenever he got near it. And then, as is our want, Maddison actually started playing through the middle, right up front, with Mowbray's tactic of kind of having this flying V of 5'8" players, none of whom are ever going to win a header, but let's just throw enough
give it a whirl,
stuff
yeah?
at the
Yeah.
Give it a whirl, exactly. Like Macaulay Culkin says, see what happens. But yeah, nothing good happened, unsurprisingly. Jacob Murphy, I don't know what everybody else thinks, but I love him to pieces. But maybe like the amount of games is getting to him, I really think he needs a rest, because he just doesn't look that interested at the moment. He doesn't even seem to want to do what he used to seem to love doing, which was just standing people up and making them look stupid. But he doesn't even seem to want to do that anymore. It's just...
He's lacking confidence at the moment, isn't he? He's clearly lacking the enthusiasm he had at the start. And against Walsall, he was really flagging. And it was quite a surprise he started against Burton. And against Burton, I think it was the first time this season he came up against a defender who was capable of stopping him. And against Burton, he was poor against Burton. You could almost sort of go, I could see that coming from the Walsall game. But also, it was the first time that someone really just knew how to stop him, and I don't think he's quite recovered from that. Against Scunthorpe, he made some really strange decisions, and you could just see he was playing tired. And also, as you say, like playing on that sort of pitch, when the way he plays is a lot of sort of short, sharp sprints, isn't it?
Yeah.
It must be starting to take quite a lot. And also, he has a lot of responsibility within the side because of the way we set up. Even before we went to 3 defence midfielders, we still only really attacked with 4 players previously. And he's one of those players, every time he gets the ball, the crowd expect him to do something.
Yeah.
So when he doesn't and gives it away cheaply, he's seen as someone as an easy target because because there's so much expectation, because he's one of the only players who actually does score goals in the team. I mean, that was he got into double figures, didn't he? And that's a lot of credit for someone who's not played up front for us to score 10 goals from the sort of TV division. I think he deserves a lot more credit than he's got this season.
The one thing I would say about your analysis of there, Paul, sorry to cut in, is I couldn't agree with you more, except for the point where you started, which was confidence. And I almost think that given that we've been critical of Mowbray's rotation and saying, especially around Christmas when he, at the Oldham game, I think it was at home, where he rested him, we were saying, I especially was saying, I think of Mourinho and pick your best 11 and just run them into the ground, basically. I now look at Murphy, I don't see that as confidence. I see him just being absolutely physically fucked. He's just not capable of finishing games. And I don't know, and I'm not a football manager, so I don't know how that works. What on earth do you do with... And Mowbray referenced it himself this week. What on earth do you do with someone in that situation? Do you give him a month off, or do you give him weeks off, or what? But I think that, at least me, I would say, actually, I'll hold my hands up on this one. I was saying, no, just keep him going. I don't think it's confidence. I think he's physically fucked, isn't he?
But that's why I don't understand, like, Paul's always talking about, like, Mowbray's, like, favourites thing. Why is he refusing just to give him a rest then and just give him, like, 10 or 15 minutes here and there? Because if anyone ever needed to be sitting on the bench for a bit, let Jim O'Brien play. Like, Jim O'Brien must be thinking, what the hell have I got to do to get in this team? Like, we're sinking like a ship. And Stephen Hunt and Jacob Murphy, who's basically on Valium, are just walking straight into it.
I can't think of many other occasions where Cov fans have been so unanimously united in the fact that Jim O'Brien should be pretty much the first name on the team sheet. Neil, you're on board with this, aren't you?
Yeah, obviously. I mean, I think the whole Jim O'Brien argument sort of extends throughout the team. I mean, he's been there the whole season. He's performed well the whole season, pretty much. He's had odd bad games like everybody. And I think what my biggest issue with everything that's going on at the moment is it just feels like we're selling out the players who've actually got us into this position in favour of a bunch more players who have absolutely no cohesion with what we've built. And I looked at the team the other day, and it is literally a bunch of players on the pitch now. It's not the unit. And I recognise over the last month we've had suspensions and key people not in the right position. But it just feels like that's giving Mowbray an opportunity to say, well, he's not playing, so I'm going to have to bring someone else in. And then we've then got to change someone else. And then before you know it, you've got 5 brand new players there, and there's like zero familiarity between the team. And
Did anyone see the Opta Joe stat earlier?
Is it the 21 players that Leicester have used or something?
Yeah, Leicester have made 21 changes this season. And you think, well, we made, 4 at the weekend?
Yeah, but there's a bit to this. It's a case of how injured have players got, and Leicester have also got the Premier League lowest injury record.
I accept that, but there was a time where we weren't having change. We didn't have injuries, and the player would just go from being in the first 11 to being on the bench. You didn't know what team he was going to... And sometimes it was the same sort of squad of players for 3 or 4 games, but still we had at least one change every game. And then you've also got I'm not a massive fan of Stephen Hunt. Was he injured on Saturday? Because he went from starting the last 2 games to being not even in the squad. And that seems to happen with Joe Cole a lot, where he'll start, he'll be sub, he'll start, and then he won't be there at all. And then the next game he'll start again. And it's just there's no continuity. There doesn't appear to be any continuity anywhere. at the moment. And also, I don't think Sam Ricketts is playing particularly well at the moment. But it can't help him because he seems to be playing either in a different back four each week or in a different position each week. And we haven't had, like, let's face it, he's fallen out of love with Aaron Phillips after that. And he referenced we wouldn't have lost against Burton if it hadn't been for that individual error. He's made that comment quite a few times. So obviously Aaron Phillips is still on the naughty step. But there has been times where he could have just put Aaron Phillips back at right back and given Ricketts 5 games at centre half. But he's
I'm sure
we could still be playing a Coventry back four if we wanted to. Like when Ramage came in straight away and Ryan Haynes got dropped. And I was like, why has that happened? Ryan Haynes was doing. Someone's obviously told him, Ryan Haynes, stop going forward, just be a good little left back. And so he was doing it. He was playing steadily.
Yeah,
we could be playing Ryan Haynes at left back, Stokes and Ricketts centre back, and Aaron Phillips at right back, and we wouldn't have any of these lone continuity issues. But that's not okay.
And Ramage brought in a huge lack of trust, I thought. I mean, the problem we had with Ramage was he came in and, I mean, we heard after the first game, he said that he was nervous and he played like he was nervous. And suddenly you go from a situation where you've got a back four where they all, relatively speaking, trust each other, and they'll get into a position where people, like even Ricketts, were starting to trust Phillips a lot more because they were starting to play well. Next thing you know, you bring in Ramage, and then this thing that we talk about, like connections between players, you've got Stokes doesn't trust Ramage, so he can't pass the ball to him as much as he'd like. And then you've got Ricketts can't pass to Ramage, and Ramage can't pass to Biggie, and nobody trusts Biggie because he's on the ball. And before you know it, you've got a selection of players where nobody's got the trust, whereas before it used to be, well, Stokes could always play in the middle to Fleck. You know, Fleck wouldn't mind passing it back to Ricketts or Martin because he knew that they'd be able to find the ball back to him or something. And I just feel like it's just key positions where suddenly you've got players who are causing more issues, and it's just sort of filtering its way through the team, and all these sort of connections that we have through the team just break down because of one player. And then when you sort of extend that into 5 players in different positions, you've just got nobody knows each other. And you've got a load of players on the bench who do know each other and like could potentially still rebuild the connection that they had. And I feel like he's given up on it. And I've just got so many visions of 2002, Jim Smith, Carbonari, Trollope, the whole sort of setting out a team that was working thing happening all over again.
I dismissed your thing about Leicester, Paul, about the lack of players used and because they've had no injuries. But that I am completely with you in principle. And I'm with you again, Neil. I think that continuity breeds success, doesn't it? And I think that there are things that could dent it. And I don't think you can mitigate for being so fortunate that when you lose Johnson, who was always going to get injured at some point this season because that's what he does, that you'd get Ben Turner. And then we were lucky to get him, but then we lost him. But that doesn't mean then you've got to extend that out to just constantly rotating. And we talked about when it was Stokes at centre-back and Haynes at left-back, we talked then in really complimentary terms about 2 players who had completely exceeded expectations in their role. And that you think, if that's the case, even though it might be unorthodox, just keep it going. Yeah. Just keep it going so that you've got players who are if it's working, they're players who presumably play on the same wavelength. And me and Paul had a changing room conversation recently about the nature of the way that Ricketts has been treated. And you touched on it there, where is Sam Ricketts' form dropping, or is it just really difficult for somebody to constantly have to move around a back four with different players next to him all the time? And I think there's a mixture of both. And that it's maybe there are some players, you could put 2 players next to each other who are really good, but maybe they just don't fucking work together.
Exactly.
It's a complex team game, and there's a lot to work through. And I think the more that you fucking shake it up, the worse it's going to be. And I would suggest that if you look through our recent malaise, if you look at it compared to where we were previously, what we had before was a consistency where you could know, give or take, pre-Christmas, what the starting 11 would be, or at least 10 of them you could name. And now, week on week, I haven't got a fucking clue who's playing.
And this punishment of Phillips as well, sorry to just finish this point off, but I just feel like punishment is coming at a detriment to everything. We're basically saying, no, you can't play anymore because you made that mistake. But that one mistake, I'll happily take that one mistake and still play him if it meant that the team for the majority of the match felt comfortable and were more of a unit than we're just saying, okay, because you made that one mistake, we now have to take you out, and then we now have to play Lawrenson, who may be a good player, but he's completely fresh, completely new. Nobody knows what he's like, and he's taken it too far.
Paul, your point, and then we go back to the game and Lawrenson specifically.
Yeah, and we discussed this previously. It's not just Phillips who feel like it's being punished. I also feel like Jim O'Brien's being punished. But also, I do feel sorry for Ruben Ramirez, who is just... Is he really a worse option than Stephen Hunt? And
No. Let's
let's
kibosh that one now.
I don't want to be picking on Stephen Hunt. I mean, he's only played 2 games. The fact he got taken off at half time, that's a whole different thing about Mowbray at the moment, where he seems to be picking the wrong 11 and then changing it at half time. He seems to make a lot of substitutions, and you're just thinking, well, that should have been your starting 11. You've wasted a sub. But it is just a case of, I almost feel like just because you once rated a player doesn't mean then you should want to work with that player. And it's quite interesting. Darren Henderson's come out and said, one of the reasons I think I've signed is because of the fact I've got a really good record against Coventry and Mowbray. And you're like, okay. And I understand the fact that we needed that type of player. But then you get Mowbray coming out and going, we've needed this big physical striker all season. And then at the back of your head, the thing that's screaming in your ears is, so why the fuck did you buy Marc-Antoine Fortuné if you're now finally in January signing a strong striker who's got heading ability? Which makes the Fortuné signing even more fucking perplexing than it has been all season.
Well, that was what he was meant to be, but let's try and curb the... I'm not saying you, I'm saying all of us, the sort of the rantiness and get back to the Port Vale game. Laurie, you were saying that Lawrenson is someone that you favour. Was that... talk to us more about him.
Well, that was mainly because against Southend, he was great. He was just exactly what we needed and exactly what Stokes isn't. And I feel like maybe I'm bigging it up in my head, but the way that we play at the moment with this weird, non-striker formation, the fullbacks being able to get forward becomes so much more important. Because say you've got Jacob Murphy trying to get through down the wing, but you've got someone who's refusing to overlap on the left, which is Stokes, because every time he overlaps, he just goes back on his right foot and passes it back to Jacob Murphy. So having someone like Lawrenson or even Ryan Haynes, I feel is so important because it just takes the weight off that winger just trying to score these wonder goals like Paul talks about, which is basically what we're always trying to do. And Lawrenson, in that first patch against Southend, was just great. He just put it on the ball. You could tell he wanted it. He wasn't afraid, which Stokes just looks... He's not comfy on the ball in wide places. But then he got injured, so I don't know. Does anyone know the prognosis? Was that just a concussion?
It's a bash on the head, apparently, but apparently it's not so bad that that it's going to rule him out for a long time. Apparently, as well, Mowbray / the Cov Telegraph, not the best doctors in this situation, because I saw a thing earlier that was a picture of Mowbray with loads of blood on his head, talking about how he can't wait to meet up with Killer, and then saying that back in my day I played for 25 minutes with a broken ankle and that concussions didn't exist and everything. And you kind of look at it and you go, yeah, that might seem like it was a golden era to you, but I like the idea of people not having lasting injuries when they're adults and stuff. I quite like the idea that you might have a life outside of football and not be medically retired when you're 37.
So yeah, I think he's a good option. But again, probably he seems a little bit more exciting than Aaron Phillips, but it remains to be seen whether it's better to have a whole new player in them rather than just play Aaron Phillips.
I think it's interesting that you say more exciting than Aaron Phillips, because if anything, I think Aaron Phillips' big problem is that he's too exciting. And I think that's the reason that I love him so much.
But Joey, I've listened to you say that so many times. I haven't seen Aaron Phillips do anything exciting since he scored that goal against Wolves, which is maybe one of the best moments we've had in the last few years. But I feel is he that exciting?
He hasn't been this season to an extent, but I do think that there is, and you're right, I think there is a sort of weird 2 years ago nostalgia element. There is something about him that is a footballer that doesn't exist anymore. And I know that's hypocritical, bearing in mind what I've said literally 30 seconds ago. but I think that there is something there.
When he gets moving,
yeah,
he doesn't want to stop, does he? I mean, we've had quite a few of those moments where he just continues to drift further and further forward, and next thing you know, he's having a shot with his left foot which goes miles over or something like that. But it's kind
I
of,
remember that actually.
yeah. Which time? It's just that's kind of him, isn't it? But I kind of see Joey's point more. I mean, I've only seen that one game of Lawrenson, but I'm still in the Aaron Phillips camp just for what he can do for the whole system.
If I was picking 5 players out of the Cov squad to play in my 5-a-side team, obviously he wouldn't be first, but he would definitely be in the 5 that I would pick.
You'd get him in there, wouldn't you?
Yeah, because he's got this strange ability, and I think I think potentially there's something to be said that what will end up happening to him is that he'll drop down the leagues and play as a right-sided midfielder in a 4-4-2, because he's got a bizarre ability to sort of be like just purely upper body through a number of players into the box. That's when he's at his best, as far as I'm concerned, is when he's just sort of has got his head down to the point where he's almost horizontal and he's just running forward and people don't really know where the ball is or anything. I like that about him. It's an odd quirk. But I agree with you, Laurie. This season hasn't seen the level of dynamism that I think he's displayed in previous seasons, and I think has been underpinned by the fact that he's made quite a few mistakes. But going back to our original thing, unless Lawrenson is wildly better, if we're going to keep making changes to the back 4, it would be nice to see some level of continuity that I think Phillips could potentially bring. But I haven't seen enough of Lawrenson. Or in fact, spoiler alert, I actually haven't seen Lawrenson yet because I've been sidelined recently. But
I mean, to be honest, Phillips is now third choice right back, isn't he?
Well, yeah, I guess so.
I mean, that is just the reality. That is his position in the team. I mean, I suppose the other interesting question is how far away is Aaron Martin from returning? Because you would have thought.
To him?
Yeah, I'd forgotten about him, if I'm honest.
Well, he didn't play against Chesterfield away, did he? And no one really knew where he was at that point. And then since then, it's almost been not said but inferred the fact that we've missed him. But we obviously have missed him because our defence has been pretty shit since he went out.
Mowbray's been chatting about him in a few conferences. I've definitely heard him mention his name.
Don't you think it's interesting with Aaron Martin as a comparison point to Sam Ricketts about the nature of these things? Aaron Martin started this season incredibly highly maligned, and Sam Ricketts came in as a sort of after that Wigan game when he played really, really well. He was our captain and blah 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 blah. Whereas now the shoe has sort of fallen on the other foot, if I can mix my metaphors there. That Aaron Martin has had some decent games, but in a settled back 4 as it was at the time, and everyone has sort of, well, most people have regained faith in him, and that Sam Ricketts has started playing poorly because the back 4 changes so much, you can make that contention at least, and that now you've got people, well, I know we disagree on this, but we'll probably talk about it more on Saturday. Now, all of a sudden, you've got a situation where people might be looking at Sam Ricketts and saying, he's shaky, and Aaron Martin, I wish he'd come back in and potentially replace him. Whereas actually, the reality might be that their context is what's important there, and they might just be both all right players.
I mean, the other thing is, with Winslow returning, he's back for Saturday? I am correct in saying that?
I don't
hope so.
No.
Was it a 1 game or 2 games? I
think it was just 1 game, wasn't it?
Yeah, because it's 2 yellows. Should be back.
Just 2 yellows. So obviously he's not going to play Stevens in that anchorman position because he's going to obviously
no.
Yeah, well, he's got to bring Winslow back in. He's going to bring Winslow, and the way he talks about Fleck's going to start. He's been quite highly praiseful of Rose, but if he's going to go back to his more gung-ho approach, I assume he's going to go back to 4 up front. So we can assume that Rose may or may not drop to the bench. And then obviously he's got his
That would be so harsh because Rose is by far the best player on Sunday.
But is it?
Yes, I forgot that we were talking about a game, weren't we?
Exactly.
Ruben Ramirez was the best player on the pitch against Sheffield United. He still started the next game on the bench. You've got to get out of this mindset.
We've been here before, haven't we? Where Biggie being our best player and we still got relegated. And it's like, it doesn't matter if you're playing well yourself individually, but we've got to get that team back to what it was.
Yeah, so if we assume that Rose is going to be the one who's going to miss out because he's not going to drop either of the other two, and we've got to assume that Joe Cole's getting around to the point where he's going to be given another start, then
The wheel of fortune keeps turning.
yeah, it's a bit like, do you see that on the Telegraph? Pick your Coventry City team, and it's like, if I do this without looking, I might get it roughly about right. So he's got his new two centre halves.
Maybe Mowbray is just picking one of them every week from what he sees on the Telegraph.
And he's got Lawrenson, who is maybe or maybe not be concussed. So he's basically got to choose whether or not he's going to play Ricketts at right back or centre half, and whether or not he's going to play one of the two lone players at centre half or both of them. And then, so I think three of the back four is really up for debate. But from what everyone I've sort of read or heard speak about the Port Vale game, our defence was pretty much shocking and really only bailed out by Reece Charles Cook.
Yeah, that's what I didn't really understand about some of the feedback after, being like, oh, we did really well to soak up all of this pressure and then like grind out a point. I don't really think relying on your keeper to make world-class saves every 7 minutes is soaking up pressure. That's taking the piss, isn't it? That's just riding your luck. That's not
asking for trouble, isn't it?
And what should have happened? It's fine to like concede all those chances, whatever. But we, in the second half, when we came out, we immediately set up just like, all right, we're going to defend now for 45 minutes on a pudding and hope for the best. And obviously, because they were throwing people forward, we by default got a few chances. And because we missed about 4 of these chances, it just became so obvious that they were going to score eventually. But yeah, it just, I don't buy this. Oh, yes, it stopped the rot. We got a point. It's like that. It was there for the taking, and we should have lost like 4-1. We shouldn't even have scored that goal. I think we just should have lost that game.
I bear in mind that we are pushed for time. I shouldn't probably bring this up. But do you not think there's an element of there's more than one way to skin a cat? And if it is true, and I think this is another contentious point, that we're struggling because we're increasingly facing teams that see us as a threat and they're sitting back, is not the bright thing to do, given the pace that we've got within the team, to invite teams on us? Because if they continue to come at us, and it ultimately only took a Port Vale goal that was very good, wasn't it? It was an exceptional goal. Isn't it worthwhile to consider that maybe
in a really
you might
good
want to
way?
invite
It was just
some...
a sliced worldie. But, yeah.
Yeah, but so without that, we would have won that game 1-0 potentially. Although you were there, and I guess I should see to your actual knowledge.
Joe, I understand what you're saying, but also isn't it horses for courses? Port Vale had a vested interest in trying to beat us. Would Bury come... If you offered Bury a 0-0 draw now, and especially Fleetwood the week after, you offered them a 0-0 draw, they'd both probably take it.
Yeah, sorry, we're saying the same thing. I'm not saying do that all the time. I'm saying that you're absolutely right. I'm saying that rather than sticking to some ethos particularly, unless you are one of the absolute undisputed top teams, then you set up to win the game despite how that might look.
But I think that also... isn't as easy as I don't think it's easy to also change your tactics on a week by week basis as well. I think there has to be a middle ground, doesn't there? And I know we didn't discuss this because we didn't do the pod, but was it Burton where they brought Tudkai on?
Yeah.
And Mowbray came out afterwards and went, well, we're not used to playing the long ball, so we couldn't play it correctly. And it was like, okay, that's a bit strange. And then we brought Henderson in. And I assume, and I could be wrong, but I'm assuming Henderson gets most of his goals from crosses from wingers.
Yeah.
We don't really have... I mean, if he's going to have Henderson on the pitch, then he's got to have Jim O'Brien on the pitch, because he's the only person who can really cross. Because Murphy's not really a winger who can cross, from what we've seen. And the Henderson one, I'm sort of... bit of middle ground about, because he's obviously what we need, and then you read Leyton Orient fans and Scunthorpe fans going, thank God we got rid of that useless twat, and you're like, is bringing in a player who's been released from Scunthorpe United really the guy who's going to lead us to promotion?
But
I'm not sure.
But isn't it so, whether he's the right person or not, and I guess the problem is that this is what Fortune should have been doing, isn't it about causing havoc? Isn't it the same thing that I love about Reader Johnson in the penalty box when we're taking corners, is that it actually, when you have got, assuming that he plays with Armstrong when it comes to pass, isn't it a case of that there's more presence in the box, and that if you can create a yard of space for Armstrong, he'll take the piss out of it?
But you would have thought that would have been exactly the same, okay, maybe not with someone as good as Armstrong, but the same situation at Oldham, Leyton Orient and Scunthorpe.
But that's the crucial thing. That's the crucial thing, isn't it, I guess?
Yeah, it's, the fact is at Scunthorpe, they didn't see him as being this last-minute menace, which maybe they were trying to ask more of him than we are. Maybe, as you're saying, we're just going to use him as a last-minute battering ram when Plan A doesn't work. But, I mean, it's going to be interesting to see from now on, because if we're not bringing any more loans, then we're not going to change. Hopefully, we shouldn't be making that many more changes to the team. So this particular set of players have got 16 games in which to sort of at least secure playoff places.
I'm looking at time, and I think that we should allow Laurie, if we can possibly do so, to finish off his assessment of the Port Vale game and then move on.
Well, maybe I'll just touch on Henderson then after we mentioned him there, because when he did come on, I think that he was obviously unfit even for however many minutes he was on the pitch, but he did win a lot of headers. He almost won us the game as well. That header was cleared off the line, which was really, really close. And he's definitely offering more than Fortuné, but I still think after Tudgai's performance in the first half of that Southend game, it's such a shame that he got injured, because that was the best game I've ever seen him play for us. But in terms of the rest of that game, yeah, we sat back, hit them on the break. I agree with you, Joey, your point. Yeah, it's probably profitable to sit back like that, because that's what so many teams have been doing to us, and we do have pace, but we just weren't clinical enough. And Nola's stats that he brought up in his article are pretty worrying about Armstrong, because we really don't look like scoring goals that much, apart from when Murphy goes around the keeper. But it was a weird one, because the conditions were awful. Both teams just made so many mistakes. Sam Ricketts, the amount of times he miscontrolled it and just passed it straight out of play, which is unbelievable. But I suppose it's a positive. We drew. They're not technically awful, and no one got injured.
They've only lost once at home this season. Sorry, I know I said I wouldn't interrupt, but actually, there's something to be said for the fact that they
true.
They're not. It's not an awful draw. It's the context of the results around it all the time, isn't it?
Yeah. No, it's not an awful draw. No one was like booing at the end or being an idiot. So, the general consensus was that it wasn't a bad result.
In fact, you look at the league table; it was a damn good result, because that'll put Leyton Orient within 2 points, Port Vale within 2 points of us as well. At least it prevents keeps that gap between us and the chasing pack at about the same distance as we are now. We're 6 points behind fifth or something, or fourth.
Yeah,
something ridiculous now.
And I believe that Southend and Millwall, who are the teams in 7th and 8th, or 6th and 7th, yeah, have got a game in hand and are 2 points behind. So both of them could knock us out if they conspire to do so.
Well, because a lot of teams are playing next Tuesday, which is their game in hand. But they're probably playing on the Saturday afterwards, where we're not playing because we don't have Shrewsbury anymore. So by the end of in the next week, 10 days, we could be in the position where we've got a game in hand. But by that point, we could be 4 points outside the playoffs.
Yeah, but as I always say, why aren't he had wheels should be a lorry. So I guess you can't worry too much about what could happen.
Well, I mean, Neil's always of the opinion that these should ignore what's going on and just fight for what you can get. And I suppose if we win the majority of our last 16 games and go on the sort of run that we did in our first 18 games, then we'll definitely be in the playoffs and it won't be an issue.
I think on that subject, I think we should start producing T-shirts that say, "If in doubt, listen to Neil."
You don't want to listen to me. I feel like I live in my own world sometimes.
No, I think there was it. I think when it comes to, I think we have a lot of bluster about statistics and blah 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 blah. Actually, you might as well just wait and see what happens.
I've got to be honest though, the last couple of days I have been a bit obsessed at looking at the league table, thinking, oh God, if we don't win our next 2 games, then teams like Barnsley are going to overtake us.
But if we don't win our next 2 games, then what we playing at even thinking about playoffs? I mean, the fact that we're not gonna bumble our way in. You've got to earn it, and so you've got to go on a playoff worthy run. And I kind of feel like if you start looking at other people around you, then what you're saying is that you don't trust your own form. So if we're not going to be able to play well enough to get into the playoffs, then fuck it. They can just if the other teams are just going to win and we're just going to lose a load of games, we don't deserve to be there anyway.
There's a
And it
rare
feels
Neil
like
Allison
it's just
F-bomb
changing
there.
so much week on week. Like, it wasn't very long ago when we were, in my head, I was thinking we have to beat Walsall and Burton at home, otherwise it's a disaster. Now
That's a
I
month
don't
ago.
even think we're going to beat Fleetwood and Bury at home. Like, I'd probably take 4 points out of that. Like, what's happened?
Yeah, and that's the weird thing, isn't it? Right, okay, I think it's probably about time for us to move to Only Correct. So, Paul, you've got some questions, and it's a brand new face-off.
I
of
thought we'd
Laurie
skip
versus
this one.
Neil. Oh, okay, well, yeah, okay. That's fine.
Sorry, it's 11:15. I've got to go for R5.
That seems fair. That seems
Context.
fair.
Let's do it.
Neil, I hope you prepared a brief preview then.
Yeah, it was one of those BBC specials, Joey.
Oh,
we
yeah.
were like,
Don't let them beyond the curtain.
they must know. Basically, this is what you do. You look at the table, run through the table, and then you look at the top scorers. Job's a good one. Let's do this live.
Right, bring it.
Previewing Bury, you're from that neck of the woods. What'd you say?
Very.
Bury, yeah.
Bury. Okay. Bury are 15th in the league, having played 38 games. First
Are
line
they
of the
really
table.
15th?
They've
Yeah,
been on a stinking run.
Oof.
They played
Yeah,
38 games.
Oh, I'm doing the preview, lads. Come on, that's one of my stats.
I thought we'd only played 30.
Paul, come on, you've got to be up at R5.
Sorry.
No, I meant 28. Sorry, I got ahead of myself.
That's a good
They've
start.
played 28 games. So that's 2 less than us. So if they win their 2 games in hand, they'll be 4 points off us, which is still pretty rubbish. But it's worth noting. That's kind of how the table goes. It's going to ask a bit though, because if you look at the run they're on, like Laurie just said, they've won once in the last 7 games and lost 5 of those. Which
They're picked
is
since the Gillingham game. They're one of the only teams to pick up less points than we have in the last 12.
Always there to trump your
Yeah.
stat.
they're pretty useless, aren't they? Now here we go. This makes us feel better though. They've scored 13 less than us. They've conceded 10 more. They've lost 4 more, and I guess all told, basically, we shouldn't really be scared of them. But when you look at how we're playing at the moment and sort of the pigs here we're making of things, you still can't help but worry. What else? They lost 3-0 to Barnsley in their last game. Their top scorer is Leon Clark, as we all remember him, but I think we'd all take him at this moment in time.
Oh, yeah.
Don't know what he's doing there, but never mind.
What I wouldn't give for Leon Clark.
Yeah, they've got a collection of players, all notable in some form. Tom Pope, Tom Soares, Brian Lowe, I don't know, 92 or whatever he is. Nathan Cameron's there, got 4 goals from the fence. That's more than Vince a lot. Chris Hussey's there as well. They've got, fair group of players. And also, they've got Chris Eagles, apparently, haven't they, Joey?
Yeah, who... and Bury fans out there that are listening to this, one, what the fuck are you doing? Secondly, correct me if I'm wrong. I think there was the discussion about he was training with the club, and then when Joe Cole signed, there was that thing where he was kind of like, I guess I'll get a lift somewhere else. Everyone was like, yeah, whatever, Chris Eagles. I think he started the first 3 games for Bury after that when he signed for them, and then was wank. And then I think he came off the bench a couple of times, and I've got a feeling that he hasn't really done anything since. I could be corrected on that, but I know that certainly for the first 10, 15 games, he just faded into obscurity, which is another brilliant example of Cov fans knowing everything. Because if it hadn't have been for Joe Cole coming on the scene, and he'd have gone, people would have been like, "Why did we?" Maybe he's just shit.
Those magical
Nick-
drop downs
yeah.
of the league don't work anymore, do they?
Jose is having a good season though.
Is that? Oh, it's all gone wrong. Two people spoke at once.
Sorry, Laurie, what did you say?
No, just a backhanded comment about Nicky Jose, the
Oh
swimmer.
yeah, of course, yeah. Another classic. Another one that got away. For every fucking Leon Clark that's out there, there's a Latif Al-Fadaliu who someone nearly signed for a different club and that has disappeared into the ether. Saying that, actually, Nicky Jose has done alright, hasn't he?
Is he?
Yeah, Nicky Jose is one of the top scorers in the league. He had a really, really, really slow start and then he's picked up.
Nice one.
I feel like I've fucked it up with actual knowledge. It's one of the rare football preview podcasts where someone actually knowing what was happening has fucked up the flow of things. Sorry, no, Nicky Jose's gone on something of a run recently, I believe. He's one of the top scorers in the league. I have to check it, but I think he's one of the top scorers in the league.
13, yeah.
Yeah. By the way, Adam Armstrong, still on 17 goals as top scorer in the league. The last time I looked, he was 5 clear of anyone else.
Well, he did score an absolute shitload in quite a short amount of time. And then he had... No, to be fair, though, as the Community Telegraph pointed out, he has scored 4 in his last 4 games. 2 of them were penalties, the other 2 were against Crewe. But he has scored 4 in his last 4 games.
He got a hat-trick against Crewe, didn't he?
Pardon?
He got a
hat-trick against Crewe, yeah. One of them was a penalty.
Okay.
I know it's the way... I just have this... I always think that sort of penalties are just one of those things which, yeah, it's great, but someone else probably could have taken that penalty and scored.
but weirdly, we never ever score penalties. So scoring them
in fact, if anyone else had taken that penalty and had missed, yeah.
No, I'm not disputing that. But I always think you've got to put things in context. It's like Alan's Premier League of all time, but about 80% of his goals in his last 10 years were penalties. He was too old to do anything else.
I love the fact that you're bagging Alan Shearer's goal scoring record. Alan Shearer's got 80 more goals than the next highest scorer. You're like, yeah, but a lot of them were penalties, so they don't even really count.
He took 80 more penalties than anyone else. No,
should we scratch off 3 headers and tackles as well then?
But I mean, it's just like at the end of the day, Armstrong is clearly going through a slight issue, apart from against Crewe. But against, I get the feeling against Port Vale he wasn't much good. Against Scunthorpe at home, he was pretty lousy. But then again, as sort of we've discussed time and time again, he is playing his first full season in league football, and
it's his birthday. That should give him a massive lift.
Well, yeah.
19. He's 19.
Yeah.
Man's at least 30.
Think on that for a second, guys. Right, okay. Is that nearly done with preview?
I don't want to say any more because I just feel like I'll be usurped every single point I make. So.
Sorry, Neil. Yeah, I think the nature of the fact that, one, we haven't done a pod for a month, everyone is desperate to jump on top of each other, and I apologise if that's the case with me. Secondly, I am tired and emotional in both the real sense and journalistic sense, probably hasn't helped. And, yeah, everything else, I guess. So I apologise.
It's been a hard couple of months. I don't know, sort of we're 5th in the table, so it all sounds a bit... But it's like hard work supporting Cov. Even in a sort of generally successful season, it's still fucking hard work. And so, how many games have you been to this season, Laurie? Sorry, how many games you missed?
2.
You've missed 2 games, and you still haven't seen us win in 3 months.
Oh no, that's 3. I missed 3.
The
last win I saw was Gillingham,
which was October. No, November.
No, mid-November.
Yeah.
Wow, really?
So even in a good season, you can still have a fan who's only missed 3 games all season, and he still hasn't seen us win for 2 months or 3 months or whatever it is. It's like, that's just fucking ridiculous. Any other team who's 5th in the table, okay, apart from maybe Derby, if you've missed 3 games, you're likely to have seen them win in the last month. Not Cov.
Why weren't you at Crewe?
I I
Yeah,
was on the
lightweight. Why
list,
weren't you
so-
at Crewe? What excuse you got, eh?
I was in Switzerland. I tried to come home early, trust me, but
Okay.
couldn't do it.
All right, final thing before we go then. Neil, what's your 11 for Saturday?
Oh Christ, 11. That's not final thing. That's some ages. Okay, Reece Charles Cook, Aaron Phillips, Chris Stokes, Bailey Thingamajig and Ricketts, Vince Lott and Fleck in the middle, O'Brien, Joe Cole and Murphy and Armstrong up front. Back to basics.
Where's
back to
Madison?
no, not in there. Not this game.
Oh, okay. Paul, are you looking for everyone's first 11s, or are you just interested?
Yeah, everyone's first 11. I wasn't just picking on Neil.
Laurie, I'm looking for yours next.
All right, so I'm going to continue to live in the dream world where we're actually allowed to select players who will obviously never play for us again. So Ryan Haynes, left back, Reece in goal, Ricketts and Stokes in the middle, and Lawrence in at right back if he's ready. Fleck and Vince Lowe midfield, Madison, Jim O'Brien, Ruben Ramirez, and then Armstrong up front.
Paul?
I'm going all the way back to the Gillingham game, which was Reece Charles Cook, Ricketts was at right back, and Stokes at left back. So I'll have the two new centre halves we've got on loan in the centre half position. Then you go back to Fleck and Winslow, and then you've got the only other player out of that team who's missing is Ryan Kent. So I'll bring Madison for Kent. So I'll go Madders, Murphy, Jim O'Brien, and Armstrong, and basically go back as close as I can to the last time I saw us play really, really well.
I think there's something quite repulsive about... How old are you, Paul? 36?
Still, yeah.
I'm pleased that I knew your age. Describing James Maddison as Madders, there's just something quite gross about that. Even more so than Laurie having his name on the back of his shirt.
I think calling players by their nickname is one thing. I really hate Mogger.
Yeah, Mogger is wrong. Yeah, I'm with that.
He's not a cat.
It's an ugly word. It's just a fucking brutal word. But it's like, yeah, and then Mogger, and it's like,
why would you not call him Tony? Tony's the best name ever. You've got a bloke called Tony. Call him Tony as much as possible.
A dying breed.
But no, Mogger's just repulsive.
Actually, if you've got a man who's not called Tony, call him Tony. As Blair Adams testified.
I think, yeah, you're absolutely right. We're done with predictions, aren't we? So we're not doing predictions.
No, what's your team, Joey?
Yeah, what's your team? Yeah.
Honestly, and this is a poor admission for someone that's involved in a podcast about cars.
You don't know any of our players anymore.
Well, because I haven't seen a game in 3 weeks for different reasons, and so I can't say. I haven't seen Stephen Hunt, I haven't seen Lawrenson, I haven't seen...
When has that ever held back you lot from having an opinion?
Well, just oddly...
Joey, pick a 1 to 11.
Of all the things, I'm not scared of having an opinion, obviously, but I kind of feel like the turnover of players just recently, I don't know where the fuck I am. And as well, I don't know Berry well enough or anything. I still feel like I'm so heavily influenced by the Premier League and blah, blah, blah. I think that if what's really happening is that we're being stifled by teams that are sitting back, which actually I'm not convinced about entirely... If that's what's stifling us, then maybe you start to invite teams on and you hit them on the break, because if you've got players with pace, that's what you should do. And I think that actually him saying, oh yeah, we dropped the number 10 into like a number 4 against Port Vale, but we're going to change it back to fit our fucking footballing ethos, which is something that bugged me today. I kind of think, no, win the fucking game. Bury are going to come there, if they're 15th in the table, they're going to come to the Rico and not look to beat us. So maybe you fucking sit back and give them a false sense of security and think, fucking hell, I thought they were going to come at us. And let them fucking come on, and then do them with pace in the later stages of the game. But I will say that with the absolute caveat that I know fucking nothing about football, and Tony Mowbray is a man who obviously knows a lot more than me.
Joey, one thing I would take credence to that is I've been watching commentary for 30 years. And I can definitely assure you there is a Coventry City way. And I'm glad that Mowbray wants to return to that fast attacking football that I've known to grow and love over that time. And the fact that Barcelona believe they came up with tiki-taka before we did is just a farce. As Aidy Boothroyd once showed, you can have managerial career of doing one thing. When you come to Coventry, it's all about ball on the ground to feet.
Okay, that's us done, I think, this week. We very quickly, Art of Football, at Art of Football on Twitter, and artoffootball.com, probably, I haven't checked it, but I think so, the website, have produced a T-shirt that has got a Keith Houchin design on that is absolutely banging. Have a look at it, specifically check on Twitter, mainly because I think I've made the website address up, but it's a T-shirt with a really nicely designed thing of Keith Houchin's goal in the FA Cup final that we won. We've got one up for grabs. Paul, stop laughing.
It is art_of_football.
Thank you, Paul. That helps a lot. art_of_football on Twitter. We've got a competition when they very kindly donated a T-shirt of theirs that depicts that particular scene. And all you need to do is, bear in mind some of the woes that we talked about earlier, you need to write to us, neelampteyshow@gmail.com, with your greatest tale of Coventry City supporting woe. Write to us and tell us the best one, and then we'll pick them out, and whoever has been the most fucking unfortunate, we will give them a T-shirt. So write to us, neelampteyshow@gmail.com, and we'll do that. If you want to get in touch with us on Twitter for any other reason, for whatever reason, then it's @NeilAmpteyShow. Apart from that, we're going to wrap it up tonight and say thank you to Paul.
Cheers, mate.
Thank you to Neil.
Thank you.
Laurie, where can we find your blog?
At thelonelyseason.club.
Thank you very much. And thank you guys for listening. And it's good to be back. Bye.